Energy Solutions Center in partnership with the United Nations Foundation Energy Access Practitioner Network. Today's webinar is focused on empowering livelihoods, new research on off-grid appliances and equipment. Before we begin, I'll quickly go over some of the webinar features. For audio, you have two options. You may either listen through your computer or over your telephone. If you choose to listen through your computer, please select the mic and speakers option in the audio pane. Doing so will eliminate the possibility of feedback and echo. If you choose to dial in by phone, please select the telephone option, and a box on the right side will display the telephone number and audio pin you should use to dial in. If anyone's having any technical difficulties with the webinar, you may contact the GoToWebinars help desk at 888-259-3826 for assistance. If you'd like to ask a question, we ask that you use the question pane where you may type it in. Also, the audio recording and presentations will be posted to the Solutions Center training page within a few days of the webinar broadcast, and will be added to the Solutions Center YouTube channel, where you'll find other informative webinars as well as video interviews with thought leaders on clean energy policy topics. Finally, one important note to mention before we begin our presentation is that the Clean Energy Solutions Center does not endorse or recommend specific products or services. Information provided in this webinar is featured in the Solutions Center Resource Library as one of many best practice resources and reviewed and selected by technical experts. Today's webinar agenda is centered around the presentations from our guest panelists, Yasmin Irboy-Ruff, Elisa Lai, and Michael Kuntz, who have joined us to discuss the role of off-grid appliances and equipment in powering resource-constrained communities. Before we jump into the presentations, I'll provide an overview of the Clean Energy Solutions Center, and Jem Porcaro from the United Nations Foundation will provide an overview of the Energy Access Practitioner Network. Then following the panelists' presentations, we'll have a question and answer session where panelists will address questions submitted by the audience. At the end of the webinar, you'll automatically be prompted to fill out a brief survey as well. So thank you in advance for taking time to respond. The Solutions Center was launched in 2011 under the Clean Energy Ministerial. The Clean Energy Ministerial is a high-level global forum to promote policies and programs that advance clean energy technology, to share lessons learned and best practices, and to encourage the transition to a global clean energy economy. 24 countries in the European Commission are members, contributing to 90% of clean energy investment and responsible for 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions. This webinar is provided by the Clean Energy Solutions Center, which focuses on helping government policymakers design and adopt policies and programs that support the deployment of clean energy technologies. This is accomplished through the support in crafting and implementing policies related to energy access, no-cost expert policy assistance, and peer-to-peer learning and training tools, such as this webinar. The Clean Energy Solutions Center is co-sponsored by the governments of Australia, Sweden, and the United States, with the in-kind support of the government of Chile. The Solutions Center provides several clean energy programs and services, including a team of over 60 global experts that can provide remote and in-person technical assistance to governments and government-supported institutions, no-cost virtual webinar trainings on a variety of clean energy topics, partnership building with development agencies and regional and global organizations to deliver support, and an online library containing 5,500 energy policy-related publications, tools, and videos, and other resources. Our primary audience is made up of energy policymakers and analysts from governments and technical organizations in all countries, but we also strive to engage with private sectors, NGOs, and civil society. The Solutions Center is an international initiative that works with more than 35 international partners across its suite of different programs. Several of the partners are listed above in the slide and include research organizations like IRENA and IEA, and programs like SE for All, and regional focus entities such as EcoWatts, the Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. A marquee feature of the Solutions Center provides is a no-cost expert policy assistance known as Ask an Expert. The Ask an Expert service matches policymakers with more than 60 global experts selected as authoritative leaders on specific clean energy finance and policy topics. For example, in the area of appliances and equipment, we are very pleased to have Christine Egan, Executive Director of CLASP, serving as one of our experts. If you have a need for policy assistance in appliances and equipment or any other energy sector, we encourage you to use this valuable service. Again, this assistance is provided free of charge. If you have a question for our experts, please submit it through our simple online form at cleanenergysolutions.org/expert, and you can see the link on the slide above. And we also invite you to spread the word about this service to those in your networks and organizations. Today's webinar is co-moderated by Jem Porcaro, who is the UNF Senior Director for Energy Access. He oversees the Foundation's work to expand access to modern energy services and build synergies with UN agencies and other key multilateral partners, especially sustainable energy for all. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. First up is Yasmin Irboy-Ruff, who manages the Efficiency for Access Coalition and oversees associated communications activities around the coalition, as well as UK aid-funded low energy inclusive programs. Following Yasmin, we'll hear from Elisa Lai, who is the leading technical expert on off-grid appliances and managing the global LEAP off-grid appliance data platform and much of CLASP-related test method development and quality assurance work. And our final speaker today is Michael Kuntz, who's the president and CEO of Simusolar, a financier and distributor of off-grid agriculture and fishing equipment in Tanzania. And I apologize, we are having some technical difficulties. And now, with those brief introductions, I'd like to welcome Jem to the webinar.
Thanks, Katie. Much appreciated. I'm going to just pull up my screen here. Let me know if you can see this. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see your screen. If you just want to put it in slideshow mode.
Perfect.
Perfect.
All
Wonderful,
right.
Jem. Welcome.
Thank you, Katie. Pleasure to be here again, co-moderating this exciting webinar. Again, my name is Jem Porcaro. I manage the UN Foundation's Energy Access Program. And as Katie said, my role really is just co-moderator, so I'm going to try to say as little as possible, get out of the way, and let our speakers have some time to present, and then I will help facilitate a little bit of a discussion on the back end. But before I do that, just a quick word about the Energy Access Practitioner Network. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, we too were established in 2011, really for the purposes of helping catalyze and grow kind of a more thriving global distributed energy access sector. We do that principally by connecting our membership, which now includes about 2,500 individuals who are working in about 170 countries around the world, to news and information, industry insights, market intelligence, like what we're going to hear a little bit more about later today. But more important, and most importantly, to themselves. So we facilitate a lot of peer-to-peer learning, brokering partnerships. So over the years, we kind of started out at about 20 members. As I said, we're about now up to 2,500, making us one of the largest networks of its kind, really for kind of providing an unparalleled platform for better understanding the opportunities and challenges that we all face in the energy access sector. So a little bit about the webinar itself. I think most of you on this webinar probably would agree with me in that the appliance market often receives less attention than typically the solar home system and mini-grid markets, and yet it remains a critical and growing part of the overall energy access value chain. In fact, I think it's fair to say that in order to reach its full potential, the global off-grid clean energy market really needs a complementary market for high-quality that meet off-grid consumers' needs. And so it was really with that in mind that we decided to put this webinar together, really to examine how underserved communities can tangibly benefit from the development of highly efficient off-grid appropriate products. And we wanted to draw on two recent pieces of market intelligence, at least one of which the Energy Access Practitioner Network partnered on. And that first one is the 2018 Off-Grid Appliance Market Survey report, which I know Yasemin will delve into a little bit more in detail, but that really examines the evolving perceived demand for and impact of different products within the off-grid appliance market. The other piece of market intelligence that I think we're going to touch on today is the Appliance Data Trends report, which examines in more detail the market trends for those appliances most in demand by or under-electrified consumers. And that specifically means off-grid appropriate TVs, fans, and refrigerators. And these two products are really the product of the Efficiency for Access Coalition, which again, I think Yasemin and Elisa will talk more about. So our hope for today is that our panelists, our speakers, will react to some of the findings from these two reports, specifically touching on issues that relate to productive uses, income generation, gender, consumer protection, quality assurance, and impact. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Yasemin. Obviously, I encourage all of you to follow us on social media. I've included our social media kind of handle. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Yasemin.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can hear us okay now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
TV. Hello, everyone. Can you hear us okay?
Great. Yes, we can.
You should have the pop-up on your screen. Can you see it?
Yes. Are you able to see our screen now?
No, we are not.
Okay, 1 second. How about now?
Yes, if you want to put it in presentation mode.
Yes. Is that good now?
No, we're still seeing just the slides. It seems
okay,
maybe
I think there is just a little bit of delay. Let me see if we can change anything on here. How about now?
No, I'm sorry. We're just still seeing the same frozen screen.
Okay, Katie, could you take the presenter back and give it back to me again? Maybe we can just try.
Absolutely.
Sorry about that, everybody.
All right, you should see it up on your screen again.
Perhaps as we wait for this to get up, I'll just introduce Yasemin's current presentation in terms of what she's going to be covering. She's really going to be providing an introduction to the Efficiency for Access position, provide a little bit of a review of the survey report that I mentioned, and we'll kind of close kind of touching on a few of those issues and topics that I mentioned earlier, including gender, and after that, we'll hear from Elisa.
And I'm sorry, we're having a lot of feedback and echo. Yasemin, did you join on two different connections? Are you joined on two different computers or called in and on a mic?
No, we're only on one computer, but we have been having some technical difficulties. Katie, would it be possible for you to share the screen, and then I can just speak through the slides?
Yes, we will happily do that.
Let's do that so that we don't waste anybody's time. But I can get started on just introducing myself and saying thank you to everyone. Apologies. Thank you for your patience. And we're very happy to be here today as part of our joint collaboration with the Energy Access Practitioner Network, as well as Power for All, on our Productive Use Month. Throughout October, we have been using the hashtag Productive Use Month and talking about the role of efficient appliances from a productive use lens. as well as customer perspectives. So we're looking forward to talking about some of that with you today. Katie, do we have the slides ready?
You're pulling them up right now.
Perfect.
All right, we have them up on the screen. Once again, welcome to the webinar, and for our attendees, my apologies for the technical difficulties, and we'll continue on.
Yes, thank you so much. Katie, could we move on to the second slide, please? Great, thank you so much. I want to kick things off by looking at the broader picture and give everybody a little bit of context around our theory of change. As you know, and as most of you are a part of, the off-grid solar market continues to grow rapidly. And a key driver of this growth is the increasing uptake of solar home systems and similar off-grid systems that are large enough to power household appliances, as well as an increasing awareness of the transformative potential for such distributed renewable energy systems to power productive use appliances. So our theory of change looks at the energy efficient appliances as a catalyst in scaling energy access. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, many people think that appliances still consume too much energy to be compatible with something like a solar home system. Here we show in green the amount of PV and battery capacity that is needed to run an off-grid appropriate refrigerator, along with 4 LED lights, a radio, a phone charger, a fan, and a TV. The orange icons, in contrast, show the amount of PV and battery capacity you would need to run the same system with an average conventional on-grid refrigerator. So to power the on-grid product, you would need almost 9 times the amount of PV and more than 8 times the battery capacity. As you can imagine, the cost of such a system also at this size would be prohibitive for a lot of off-grid customers. So if products are designed and developed explicitly for use in off-grid and weak grid resource-constrained settings, the market opportunity grows considerably. Next slide, please.
Just one moment, we're switching presenter modes. We're having some technical difficulties on our end as well today. So just one moment and we'll get it back up onto the next slide.
No problem. I can still start talking about it. You will soon see a similar diagram to what we just showed, but going a step further, we want to be looking at appliances outside of a vacuum tube, beyond individual pieces or just household level appliance use, to holistic ecosystems powering and scaling energy access. There are positive signals from energy access professionals, as well as development finance institutions and other funders engaged in the sector, including our Efficiency for Access Coalition's Donor Roundtable, which I will get to in just a second, towards a more holistic approach to electrification. Now that we have the slide up, you will be able to see what we're talking about, as we mean that there is a growing interest in enabling and scaling higher levels of energy access that go beyond household electrification to powering appliances for productive use, as well as for public institutions such as schools and health clinics. Here we show that the same size energy system that's required to power an inefficient vaccine refrigerator could actually power a far more expensive load when a super efficient refrigerator is used alongside a suite of other efficient appliances and medical devices. However, very little market data exists in general to inform potential investment, business, and design decisions for market actors looking to expand to new product areas, whether they're household, productive use, or healthcare use. The work we will present today hopefully will be a key input to informing this prioritization. Next slide, please. Before getting into the insights from the 2 research reports that Jem mentioned, I also want to briefly introduce our Efficiency for Access Coalition. You might have heard of the Efficiency for Access framework, which began as a global campaign to harness the game-changing power of energy efficiency to drive universal energy access and enhanced energy services beyond lighting by 2030. It was relaunched in late 2017 with the support of UK government's DFID, and current coalition members, or I should say current donor roundtable members, include UK Aid, Power Africa, ESMAP, IFC, the World Bank, Shell Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Good Energies Foundation, GIZ's NDEV, and most recently, we're very happy to welcome Dune Foundation also to the coalition family. CLASP, alongside the Energy Saving Trust, or EST, serve as the secretariat of the coalition, and we also manage the LEA program, which I will get to in a second. Next slide, please. This slide quickly shows you the breadth of our coalition members' current activities across different technologies and geographies. You can see the little icons representing the technologies and the dots representing different donors. So it's quickly, you can see, for example, that refrigeration is on top of every coalition member's mind. And our goal is to grow this footprint in future years. You can visit our website, efficiencyforaccess.org, to learn more about each donor organization as well as the work that they do on different technologies. Next slide, please. And since I just mentioned the LEA program, or Low Energy Inclusive Appliances, just want to mention that it is the flagship program under Efficiency for Access and is funded by DFID for 5 years as a research and innovation program. Next slide, please. LEA's goal is to help halve the cost and double the efficiency of a range of often weaker appliances in least developed countries. Here you can see the different technologies of focus currently under LEA, and they're divided into near-to-market technologies, as you can imagine, such as televisions, fans, solar water pumps, and refrigerators, which is mainly what we will be talking about today, but also other horizon-enabling technologies that you see on the right side. Next slide, please. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but you're more than welcome to take a look at it after the presentations. This is just a quick snapshot into how LEA's different work streams, which are shown on the left as activity types, are leading various threads of work relevant to different technologies. We are expanding the scope of this diagram more and more every day, especially under our research work, and we would be more than happy to give you more details if there are any questions after the webinar. Next slide, please. So now we get to dive into our first report. This will be a broader outlook across all relevant appliances and technologies for off-grid use. And then when Elisa takes over, we'll be looking at specific technologies under these. Next slide, please. So Efficiency for Access, in collaboration with the Energy Access Practitioner Network, earlier this year conducted an online survey of energy access professionals to assess the demand and impact potential of 46 off-grid appropriate appliances. And this was done across 3 different segments, appliances that are relevant for household use, productive use, and healthcare or clinic use. The survey received 135 respondents from participants around the world. If you participated in the survey, thank you very much for doing so. And we definitely got an overwhelming response from energy service providers that are active across sub-Saharan Africa. And a lot of the results are a result of that also. I want to mention that this was the 3rd time this survey was done in collaboration with the Practitioner Network, and this gave us a great opportunity to continue and expand on regional, sectoral, and yearly comparisons so that we could plot changing signals in terms of market readiness and customer interest in different appliances. Next slide, please. I want to take a few minutes just to discuss some of the key takeaways that we took out of the report. As you can imagine, we found that since 2014, LED room lighting continues to be the highest ranked household appliance in terms of both perceived customer demand and impact potential. This underscores the fact that basic energy access needs continue to remain out of reach for many households and communities across the globe. An interesting finding was that fans were ranked first in terms of demand in South Asia alone. And similarly, air conditioning units only made it into the top rankings in South Asia. So such regional differences suggest that while customer demand for off-grid appliances remain broadly similar across regions, as we can expect, regional preferences are still important and should be taken into consideration. There is an increasing demand for and a growing commercial opportunity around refrigeration technologies at all scales, whether it was household use, agricultural processing, cold chain use, or for businesses and productive uses. Any kind of refrigeration technology consistently ranked in the top rankings. And more work is definitely needed to unlock the affordability of refrigeration technologies, as well as their off-grid appropriateness, so that we can reach true scale for this near-to-market technology. Solar water pumps emerged as the top near-to-market appliance of note for the first time ever, being ranked above many other appliances. Off-grid customers are also showing interest in a wider range of appliances, as evidenced by high rankings for many of the newly introduced categories, such as electric cook stoves, as well as internet or connectivity equipment. In terms of healthcare, there were unclear patterns of rankings for specific medical equipment, which I will unpack a little bit more in a few slides, but this underscores the need for additional resources to scope out region and clinic-dependent nuances. We are actually working on an efficiency for health concept with the UN Foundation's Powering Healthcare, as well as the Clinton Health Access Initiative, or CHI. We're very excited to see where this work and research may take us in terms of discovering which medical appliances, for example, have the highest potential for efficiency measures. In terms of gender results, household appliances that support labor-intensive activities seem to showcase a significant difference between gender perspectives, and I will again explain this in a bit more detail shortly. And finally, many of the appliances that ranked highly in terms of perceived demand or impact, which you will see in a second, actually had little to no reported sales when we asked for sales information in 2017, which shows that there is a continued lack of commercial availability and viability of many of these appliances that are showing high impact potential. Next slide, please. So now we want to showcase some of the most interesting findings from the report. Here we are showing the 2018 household appliance demand and impact rankings. The orange or yellow bars are the impact potential, and the blue ones show the perceived consumer demand for each of these technologies. As you can see, LED room lighting, as I mentioned just now, is ranked highest. What is interesting is that televisions ranked second highest in terms of consumer demand, but only fifth in terms of potential impact. While TVs are among the main inspirational products in high demand by off-grid consumers across the globe, their impact beyond simple entertainment generally is less discussed. And socioeconomic benefits of using TVs, whether it's for women's empowerment and education, information sharing, this has not been fully explored or documented, which may explain why they're viewed as a lower impact product. Other interesting findings include the fact that respondents ranked items such as modems, web routers, and internet equipment, which was a new appliance category actually that was introduced in the 2018 survey, fourth in terms of potential impact, even before TVs and tablets. Electric cook stoves, which was also introduced this year, and as you saw earlier is one of the Horizon technologies of interest under the LEA program, actually ranked relatively highly, both in terms of demand and impact, even though this technology is not necessarily viable yet due to its relatively high load requirement, which is currently only achievable with a very large-scale microgrid. This ranking underlines its importance. Next slide, please. And here we're showing a similar graph that now looks at productive use appliances, both in terms of demand and impact. Again, as we mentioned, solar water pumps rank first, followed by refrigeration. What was interesting to us was that LED room lighting, phones, and televisions were ranked consistently lower compared to household demand and impact rankings. However, they still made it into the top 10 products. In terms of, again, newly added categories, milk chilling units and food drying units made it into the top 10 ranking in terms of consumer demand. And milk chilling units actually received quite a high ranking in terms of impact. So it's definitely a technology that we will continue to keep an eye on. And the appliance that showed a significant difference between demand and impact was solar sewing machines, which were ranked quite low in terms of demand, but received a much higher impact ranking. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, one of the more interesting aspects of this year's results is that now that we have 3 versions of these survey results, we are able to do temporal comparisons to see how consumer demand and impact perceptions may have changed over time. We looked at changes through time for productive uses. This was one of the more interesting results, and they showed a significant change across time. In 2018, as I mentioned, solar water pumps ranked highest in terms of both consumer demand and potential impact, but this was the first time ever of this happening, especially being ranked above refrigeration and LED lighting appliances. The rankings for small business appliances, in particular LED lighting, mobile or smartphones, mobile charging banks, dropped much lower compared to the 2014 and 2016 findings. The biggest change actually was seen with mobile and smartphones, which dropped from being ranked second in 2016, as you can see in this graph, to 10th in 2018 in terms of potential impact. So that is a very significant change. It was also interesting that fans didn't make it to the top 10 rankings in 2018 only. Next slide, please. Now we come to the healthcare results, and in 2018 we actually divided healthcare appliances into two categories under infrastructure and medical equipment to be able to have a more granular look into demand or importance, I should say, rankings of different products that are relevant for healthcare use. We actually had a larger respondent pool than last year for the healthcare results. But interestingly, none of the survey respondents who answered these questions on healthcare rankings were actually healthcare professionals. They were all energy access stakeholders and service providers. So that is something that we should keep in mind, that these results reflect the sort of energy access side of things rather than the healthcare perspectives, perhaps. But unsurprisingly, many of the results remained similar, consistent across the board. Refrigeration, LED room lighting appliances were ranked as top 2 in terms of perceived demand by respondents in 2016 also, which you can see also happened in 2018. And many of the other appliances received similar rankings across 2016 and 2018. So there is definitely a continued need for even the most basic appliances for healthcare, especially refrigeration and LED lighting. But then when we look at medical equipment, there's also some interesting results that surface. Next slide, please. Here's a bit of a closer look at the gender differentials. This question was asked for household use only. Basically, survey respondents who answered the ranking question for household use were then asked a follow-up question of, would you change the rankings that you just gave us based on the gender of the end user? And basically, those that said that their rankings would change gave a new ranking for male and female consumer perspectives. Gender actually is a focus theme for efficiency for access as well as Leia as we continue to weave it into our research outputs, especially consumer impacts going forward. Here we show that the results show that the LED room lighting, mobile phone charging banks, refrigerator, freezer units didn't show much of a change between the female and male user perspectives, but some products definitely did. And you can see those here in terms of hand power tools, clothes washers, sewing machines, and electric cook stoves. Next slide, please. Excuse me. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, we did ask a follow-up question of following the rankings of actual reported sales in 2017. And you can see in the pie chart here that the sales data did not match the high impact perceptions that we discovered in the survey. Almost half of the sales reported were of radios, about a quarter of solar water pumps, and then smaller percentages of televisions, fans, and ICT equipment. Other technologies that you will remember ranked extremely highly, such as refrigeration units, milk chillers, these did not have any reported sales, basically. The sales data that was collected through this survey is, of course, limited, but it is still a useful benchmark given the lack of data for this nascent market. And we will be using these first insights under the Efficiency for Access Coalition to collect, verify, and continue to publish data on sales and market potential for off-grid appliances. Now that we've covered the sector's perception of consumer needs and impact, let's move into a more technical review of the off-grid appropriateness of a number of the most in-demand appliances that surfaced from this report, and ways in which we can build in quality assurance as well as customer protection. And for that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Elisa. Next slide, please.
Great, thank you. I'm excited to be here today to share some of the high-level findings from the Off-Grid Appliance Data Trends. Next slide, please. Before we dive into the report, I would just like to start with the current state of off-grid appliances market. There is very little information available regarding the performance and quality of appliances designed specifically for off-grid and weak-grid environment. This barrier is inhibiting stakeholders across the supply chain from making informed decisions. For example, manufacturers and distributors often have very little information regarding the potential cost, quality, and service delivery trade-off when sourcing between high-efficient product versus the generic baseline product. Investors and lenders, they perceive investments in appliance sector very risky. So as pay-as-you-go company are increasingly attracting more investment, access for financing for appliance manufacturer remain very little. Policymakers often do not have sufficient resources and testing capacity to collect comprehensive market data to really define and classify off-grid appliances based on their performance and potential to deliver energy access benefits. So all these different barriers is really inhibiting the growth of the off-grid appliances market as a whole. Next slide, please. To fill this significant knowledge gap, the Efficiency for Access Coalition has been building technical foundation through a program called Off-Grid Appliance Data Platform. The platform is supported by the Clean Energy Foundation and the DIFIS Layout program, which Jasmine introduced earlier. On the highest level, the data platform is a program that generates and collects and shares information about appliance performance and pricing. But there is actually a lot of technical foundation that are built to enable the generation and sharing of test performance data. We start at the very bottom, which is the test method development. Most currently available test methods are not designed specifically to evaluate appliances used by off-grid consumer. For example, appliances that are used with off-grid energy system must be able to sustain voltage fluctuation. But most of the test methods for grid power domestic appliances are not written in this particular factor in mind. To enable consistent product-to-product comparison, we developed standardized test method to evaluate product design, quality, and energy performance. Test lab network, there are many national commercial test labs around the world, but very few of them have experience in testing off-grid appropriate appliances. We identify test lab partners and work with them to enhance their capacity of conducting off-grid appliance testing based on the test method we just described. And to understand what product model are being sold to off-grid consumers, we conduct survey in retail marketplaces to collect basic product information such as the product brand, model name, size, the claim energy consumption value, warranty, and retail price. The data we collected from the market informed the sampling process, and we collect the sample and test them in the test laboratory. Currently, we're conducting these type of market survey in 8 different countries, in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and also in East Africa, which is Sierra Leone, Nigeria, but also in South Asia, which is India, Pakistan, and Myanmar. Today, the program has identified more than 1,500 television fans refrigerator models around the world and tests about 300 products in the laboratory setting. Next slide, please. The data generated through the data platform enable us to develop pretty interesting analysis and insights, particularly around efficiency and pricing trends. In terms of approach, data trends report focus on 3 most demanded appliances, which Yasmin also mentioned earlier, TV, fans, and refrigerator. Our approach is to really map out the performance and price of each individual models tested through the data platform, create year-by-year baselines, and compare off-grid appliance performance with on-grid products that are similar in sizes. It's also important to note that the test data that we're referencing here are collected from 2 different sources. By saying baseline product, we're referring to the generic AC or DC appliances we procure from the market. And a lot of those are more generic Chinese imported appliances. The awards product that we're referring to is the product submitted by manufacturers and distributor for the Global Leap Awards competition, which is the international competition that identifies high-performing off-grid appliances in various categories. The awards product are also randomly selected and tested from manufacturer warehouses. All these products are tested in test laboratory based on these different parameters that you're seeing on the slide, so energy performance, efficiency, service delivery, durability, safety, and quality and workmanship. And all these test methods you can actually find on the Energy Efficiency for Assets Coalition website. Next slide. For the sake of time, in the following slides, we're using refrigerator analysis as an example, but please do check out the Data Trends report for more fans and TV data. Refrigerator, as mentioned, is one of the highest consumer demand product, but it's also one of the most challenging off-grid appliances to design and develop. The global market for off-grid appliances, for off-grid refrigerator, is actually still in a very early stage of development. Between 2016 to 17, we test about 57 refrigerator models. For the purpose of study, the refrigerator energy efficiency index, as you can see on the left side, is defined as the unit surface area per daily energy consumed, so meter square per kilowatt hour per day. As you can see, the arrow is pointing up. The higher the EEI, the more efficient the refrigerator is. The graph is showing the efficiency value of these 57 refrigerator models tested and the average efficiency value of 2017 awards winners, finalists, and baseline products. What we can see from this graph is that there is a significant gap between baseline and awards product. If we take one of the highest point in the chart compared to one of the lowest point here, the worst performing refrigerator in 2017 data set used 19 times more energy per unit surface area than the most efficient refrigerator tested. But also on the average, the efficiency of awards finalists and winner products are close to 2 to 3 times more efficient than the baseline products. This chart also tells us that the daily energy required to operate a typical off-grid refrigerator is high. The average refrigerator requires about 0.7 kilowatt per day to operate in an ambient temperature of 72 Celsius. Under the optimal conditions, this would require a solar home system with at least 200 watt peak solar panel and a 160 mAh battery. This is still like too big for most of the off-grid consumer to be able to afford. Next slide. In terms of pricing trend, the high price of refrigerator is a critical barrier to consumer adoption. Off-grid and weak-grid consumers are very price sensitive, especially for large investment appliances such as refrigerator. The price of refrigerator range roughly from $300 on the low end to roughly about $2,000 on high end. What we can see is that there are increasingly more specialized off-grid refrigerator that use new technology such as phase change material technology to really improve the thermal performance. But these products also comes with a much higher price tag. The other factor that we're seeing in this chart is that the high price is not always associated with better energy performance or quality. Because of the inconsistency in refrigerator pricing, we conduct additional analysis to kind of look at the correlation between energy performance and pricing. The data indicate that among the products that perform similarly in terms of energy efficiency, the retail price ranged from roughly $360 to $1,300. That's like 3.6 times difference. So without the proper performance data, distributors and consumers can only make decisions based on price, but higher price products do not necessarily mean higher quality or efficiency. Next slide, please. We look at the off-grid refrigerators and compare the performance of these products with the most efficient on-grid refrigerator, basically the product that carry A++ or A++ European energy labels. The data that you're seeing here indicates that most efficient on-grid refrigerator in the European market are still a lot more efficient than off-grid products. There's significant potential to improve efficiency for off-grid refrigerator so they can catch up with the on-grid product market. But we're also seeing that for a refrigerator, and here we're referring to the product that only have fresh food compartment, we can see the gap between the most efficient off-grid refrigerator model and the on-grid refrigerator model is closing up. For the refrigerator and freezer combination unit, the difference in terms of efficiency is still pretty significant. Certain design improvements, such as using like higher efficiency compressor or better insulated technology, can really help off-grid refrigerator freezer to be more efficient. Next slide. So here are some additional insight, and I'll be quick and brief about these. One thing that I really want to highlight is actually the importance of field testing. Field testing is one of the growing topic, and it's really important for the off-grid appliance development. In contrast to laboratory testing, which is like controlled and conducted to ensure reliability and repeatability, field testing deliver different set of insight to appliance performance, quality, durability, and consumer experience. And this is especially important for off-grid appliances, since in many cases, consumer usage and preferences is not very well documented and understood. We're also seeing that assessing product durability and quality is really critical to consumer protection. Many rural consumers living in remote area where accessing maintenance and warranty is extremely difficult. Our test has found that 2/3 of fans fail certain aspect of the drop test. Sometimes malfunction of the motor, sometimes just shelter the motor casing or damage the fan guard. But regardless, product failures and bad user experience can quickly erode consumer confidence in appliances and their brands. So like having appropriate quality assurance framework in place, look at the broader quality issues such as choosing advertising warranty more holistically would be a very important part of market development to inform stakeholder and champion quality products. Next slide, please. And just to put a very quick plug in, Efficiency for Assets Coalition is planning to launch a public-facing, user-friendly web database in the first quarter of 2019. This will be an open platform for users to access most up-to-date product information and performance data. You can compare and filter data based on a variety of different attributes, such as market availability, efficiency, and pricing. So please stay tuned and sign up for Efficiency for Assets newsletter to receive more information about updates.
Thank you, Elisa. Is that your last slide?
Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. All right. A lot to unpack here, but we have one more speaker. Michael, are you still with us?
I am indeed.
Perfect. So Michael's going to talk a little bit about, from a practitioner perspective, some emerging research that they're leading with support from Leia, in fact, on solar water pumping, which was something that certainly Yasmin mentioned. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So this is regarding a solar water pumping market research study that Leia and CLASP sponsored in Tanzania. And Simu Solar is a distributor, financer, and aftermarket servicer of a lot of different productive use equipment, including solar water pumps. So we were keenly interested to support them in this and learn more about the marketplace, as there's not a lot of information on there about these applications. Let's see here. So the research is focused specifically on solar water pumps from a energy efficiency standpoint. And we start off with a number of key questions that we sought out to answer. One was better segmentation. Who are these potential users of solar water pumps, and how might we identify them? What are the use cases for solar water pumping? What's the potential impact, with a specific focus on income, but then also some further inquiry into some of these social impacts? What is the value proposition? What drives clients to seek out or adopt solar water pumping technology once they're aware of it? And how do they afford it? We did this by surveying about 400 farmers, 81 focus groups, and 67 key informants, actually in reverse order there, to get some different perspectives of the market, speaking with experts as well as adopters of the technology. And this was covering several different regions of Tanzania, basically the Northern Highlands, Central region, and Morogoro to south. And these are all, they're very different regions, both geographically, climate-wise, and in terms of the kinds of agriculture that goes on there and other activities. So we thought it would give a good perspective and some interesting counterpoints. So first, to put this segmentation in context, there are a number of different ways that you can think about farmers as a client base. And one of the things we wanted to do at the outset was try to reduce the number of variables that we were considering and try to get down to what are the main factors. And these are just an example of some of them. I'll get a bit into what we focused on. As further context, 76% of the farmers we surveyed only irrigate 2 acres or less, and half of the farmers are irrigating less than an acre. So, you know, half the farmers are truly 1 acre smallholder farmers. And the takeaway there is that much of that limitation is due to mechanization. It's very hard to extend the amount of land you can farm if you don't have a means of spreading the water around. Financing also is, of course, a factor. 90% of the farmers were seasonal in their farming, rain-fed, waiting for the periods when the water was available to farm. And that means that there's significant gains they can gain if they adopt some sort of pumping technology where all of a sudden they can now farm year-round and benefit from bringing crops to harvest during the season, the dry seasons when prices are highest. And interesting, 40% of the surveyants used a fuel pump at some point in the year, either owning one or renting one, which really tells us that pumping technology is available, and there may be some early adopters on the substitution front versus first-time users. Looking at these factors and looking across the data, this is a work in progress, but we've converged on these 4 factors. Whether someone is currently using a pump, be it a fuel pump or a mechanical pump, whether what is the level of their capital expenditure and ongoing operating expenditure, what their market orientation is, and what that means is, are they a commercial farmer? Are they a farmer who is selling to markets when convenient, or are they a subsistence farmer that really isn't selling on growing for a market? And I think someone is off mute, so mind back on getting some back. The last factor is the water source. It's very important, obviously, for irrigation technology, whether you have a canal nearby, a lake, a river, a well, or none of the above. So here, the size of the circles on this map of Tanzania represent the ongoing operating expenditure. These are weekly operating expenditures. Those are presented in Tanzanian shillings for about 2,000 to USD, just for order of magnitude. And the coloring is whether there's a canal system present. And canal systems essentially are government or co-op sort of group developed systems that distribute water free of charge to people in the community. And you'll see what's interesting here is where you see more orange on the screen, you also tend to see smaller circles. That's because there's less motivation or need to pay for water pumping technology where you have free water, or water is gravity fed and more readily available. Singida is a bit of an exception there due to the economic position of many of the farmers there, as we'll see on this next slide. So here, if you take a look, the darker the blue you see here in the number is the higher the percentage of commercial farmers in that region. And you'll see in Morogoro, you see there's a decent number, but there are also quite a few that are more market-oriented. Singida, where we saw the smaller circles, you see is probably among the group a bit lower in terms of the breakout and the presence of subsistence-oriented farming. So this gives also some insight into where there could be potential adopters. So it's probably clear at this point that a focus was very much on horticulture. There are certainly opportunities in aquaculture, animal husbandry, and other areas, but we did not pursue those as those are not as visible a market, and we figured this is something where there's a very large need on the farming front in Tanzania, and that's where we started. But certainly there's room for further research on those fronts. Segmentation for solar water pumping is very localized, and that sort of follows with a subsequent statement that clustering and trying to make any broad conclusions requires a lot of judgment and discretion, because nuances from closeness to market, soil quality, a number of different factors can affect local adoption and what would work in a market. So the clustering that we have come up with at this point is first the group, those who would be substituting a pump. So there's many people using fuel currently, and a key pain point for them is the cost of fuel and having to spend that on a regular basis. They already have the practice, their incomes generally are a little bit higher, and so they're better positioned to adopt a solar water pump. And some of these are actually mechanical pump users as well, so it's not just fuel substitution. Secondly, there are those who have free water. They're part of a canal scheme, and yet they could improve the scale of their farming if they were to be able to distribute that water more broadly with pump technology. But the motivation's a bit less than some of the other groups. Third would be the first-time irrigators, and these are those who may have been doing bucket irrigation or simply waiting for the rains to come. And they're a bit more of they're a high-impact group if they adopt, but they're challenging because there's some behavioral change and a lot of support that's needed in them adopting the technology, which I'll touch on a bit later. And lastly, the itinerant farmers, as we fondly refer to them, and these are really professionals who are working in nearby cities but own land and will hire people to work their land and maybe come out on weekends to check up and do part-time farming. Generally higher income, greater ability to pay, less need of financing, but maybe less impact than some of the others. So in terms of impact, one of the challenges was we found 0 solar water pump users among the 400 people we surveyed. It is not a technology that's widely known or adopted, requires a high capital upfront cost, so it's not something you've really seen in the marketplace. So when we start talking impact, at least from the survey, it's very much a priori, very hypothetical. And we did do, based on current yields of farmers, working with some agronomic models, estimated what would happen if they farmed year-round and adopted solar water pumping technology, and calculated what the cost benefit would be. And we saw that on average, farmers in horticulture, that is vegetables, fruits, could pay off the pump in under 18 months, and that's using any number of different irrigation technologies. We excluded drip irrigation from the study for a number of reasons. And just to add to a bit of insight outside of the study, Acumen Lean Data did some surveys of Simu Solar clients in the past, and we saw that 94% of those surveyed experienced higher yields and 100% experienced an increase in income. So that's just to say that while we may not have a priori or actual data on experiences for the broader survey, when customers have adopted this technology, we've seen good results. further analysis, of course, is required, and I think that would be a great follow-up study. So what's the value proposition to these users of solar water pumps? Why do they adopt? What are they looking for when they go and they decide to purchase a pump from you? Well, one is servicing. There's a limit of quality providers of service, many informal service providers, but they don't necessarily know this technology and often can do more damage than good. Likewise, spare parts are hard to come by. So these are big concerns that were brought up by surveyed farmers. Secondly, it's a package. The farmers are not looking just to get a pump and go off and apply it on their own. They know that they're taking on some new practices. They know they're using new technology. And as evidence of that, when asked what some of their challenges were or what some of their needs were, the number 2 need was knowledge, was the answer, and referring to agronomic knowledge and irrigation knowledge. Similarly, irrigation technology was number 4 in the listing. So clearly there's self-awareness of the need for support. And we believe, as we'll say a bit more on, that working in a value chain with partners is really key to providing that. And this is just to round out the data. We found that 71% of users listed cost and time efficiency as a reason for adoption, and 41% listed reduced fuel expense, which of course implies that many of them had fuel pumps prior. And 100% purchased on credit. So speaking of servicing, financing of pumps is one of the services that is needed for the market to really develop. Most purchases, interestingly, in the survey group, and this is again a group with no solar water pump adoption, were cash purchases, meaning there was zero financing utilized in it. And the answers upon further exploration in focus groups included they borrowed from family, they had other savings in their groups. There are different ways they purchased it. They didn't necessarily have all the money themselves, but they didn't go to a formal financial lender. And when asked what their challenges were, financing was listed as the number 1 challenge. The largest percent of farmers indicated that was their main pain point. And some of that's due to the land title situation here, lack of collateral. There are many other structural challenges, but financing is clearly needed to develop the marketplace. And we did not explore payment terms specifically in this survey, but we did find that through CapEx and OpEx, you get a sense of what farmers might be able to afford and pay on a regular basis. And we also read into some of the complaints that we heard that farmers had about input suppliers who provided financing and how expensive that financing was. And taking that and taking the lack of use of credit to date, it really gives us a sense that these are very much interest rate sensitive buyers, and they are loan averse, so it has to be an attractive package for them to adopt it. So in conclusion, we believe that to develop this market, a great deal of market awareness is required. People really are not familiar with solar water pumping technology. There's disbelief that solar can do this. They really have to see the pumps in action to believe that they can serve their needs. Similarly, clients who already have experience with pumping technology are more likely to appreciate and get the value proposition of these and be early adopters, and then they become champions in their community and examples that others can follow. And lastly, customers need lots of support. Service-based models, we believe, will develop the market, not soul-based distribution models. Customers need ways to get information. They need aftermarket support. It really takes more than just getting equipment to them. And so that would be our counsel for a number of different product categories. And that is the end of my slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was really great, and I think that sets us up very well for a bit of Q&A, which I will probably get started by just asking maybe 1 or 2 questions of the 3 of you, and then I will probably hand it over to Katie to field questions from our participants. So let's not waste time. I'd love to kind of stay on this thread, this topic of solar water pumps, and maybe ask a question of both Michael and Yasemin and Elisa for that matter too. I mean, one of the things that I found really interesting from the survey report was the fact that solar water pumps kind of rose to the top of the productive use ranking for the first time ever, eclipsing LED lighting and other appliances. And clearly it's interesting to hear from Michael some of the dynamics around what's driving that, at least in the context of one country or one region. But I wanted to kind of unpack that a little bit more and better understand what you all thought was driving at least this perceived increase in demand for and the perceived impact of solar water pumps. Michael, you had it on one of your slides in terms of some of these drivers. You mentioned cost, time savings, economics, but can we talk a little bit more about what you all think is driving this seemingly new demand for solar water pumps? Is it in fact economics? Is it the differential in terms of the cost of fuel? I don't know, Michael, Yasemin, Elisa, do you want to kind of weigh on this? And I'd love to see if you all see this similarly, or if you have different points of view on this.
I'm happy to just share a first stab, and it was really interesting here. I forget if it was Yasemin or Elisa earlier who pointed out that the solar water pump demand or potential impact as reported by industry players is very high, but then when you actually show the pie chart in terms of adoption, it was like around 25%. And I think that gets at what we see as a giant opportunity and a real need for water in an environment of climate change and where farming is increasingly important. At the same time, it's very challenging on the distribution front. It is not a plug and play, you build it and they will come kind of product. You really have to be there engaged in these regions. You have to develop partnerships and you have to provide ongoing servicing. And so I think you'll see that adoption will be slow and take time, while the excitement around it from the industry will rightly be high, because there is so much potential. There is such a large farmer base that really would benefit.
Yasemin, Elisa, do either of you want to chime in on this this idea that clearly the sector is beginning to understand and appreciate the potential, but yet clearly from a distribution, building out the infrastructure that the sector needs, both from a distribution and after sales service point of view, is still trying to catch up. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. I agree with everything Michael said, and we do definitely see that, as he said, in terms of the offset between impact and potential demand rankings, but the lack of sales. I think this new interest in larger appliances like solar water pumps comes from a few different places. Obviously, we saw that LED lighting continues to be top of mind for everybody, so there's still a very large energy access problem. But more and more, I think the energy access sector is maturing. Those of us who have been in the sector for more than 5 or 7 years have seen it grow from, just arguing for the importance of a solar lantern even, to talking about larger solar home systems, those becoming affordable, adding on appliances. Now we're talking about all these larger scale appliances being able to be powered by smaller and smaller systems. There's, in addition to this growing maturity and interest and competitiveness also in the energy access sector, different DESCOs and energy service providers trying to provide their customers with more and more services to stay ahead. There's also really growing interest, I think, from the donor side in terms of larger appliances, more holistic ecosystems, and definitely productive use. If you ask any one of our Efficiency for Access Coalition donor members what themes or what are their focus areas, productive use will be definitely one for each and every one of them. But we do agree that solar water pumps are a different beast within the sort of near to market technologies that we discussed earlier. You can imagine a TV is a TV, right? I mean, it might change in terms of size and in terms of lumens, but it's generally the same kind of thing. When it comes to solar water pumps, Michael would have much more insight into this than I do, but I know there are submersible ones, there are surface ones, there are different types that work with different batteries. Some Some do require batteries, some don't. So it is definitely a much more complicated system. And I also want to provide a little plug here and say that in 2019, the Global Leap Awards will be for the first time focusing on not just refrigeration, but also solar water pumps. So we will be having nominations open within a month, I believe. So this is a little teaser for that. But we are definitely very much focused on test methods for solar water pumps, use cases, as Michael said, for solar water pumps, and just seeing how this sector grows, really.
Thanks, Yasmin. I want to ask Elisa a question. Before I get to that, I want to stay on this thread and maybe back to you, Michael. You touched on financing and kind of the critical barrier that access to financing plays in the adoption of solar water pumps. Can you say a little bit more about what sort of financing are you seeing farmers actually use currently for those that have adopted solar water pumps? Are they depending on local financing providers, banks, MFIs? Say a little bit more about that, and maybe as a comparison, how are farmers who are using traditional pumps financing those assets?
So there's not a lot of equipment financing available in the marketplace, period. Banks generally, there's no equipment financing sector that's developed here. Banks generally want a lot of collateral that people aren't comfortable giving up. So we have not seen solar water pumping technology adopted through bank loans at all. And we haven't obviously canvassed the entire marketplace, but it doesn't seem to be like that is an active means of financing your pump, or an attractive one at least. We have seen that among our own client base, I believe it's about 70% are using our financing to purchase the pumps. And the other either simply have the money and can afford it and are very, they're either interest sensitive, or they simply are loan averse. And there's certainly that market, which is maybe the mid to higher end market. But as you get into really the mass market of farmers, financing is absolutely critical. And pumps are different. Fuel pumps are a different beast because the entry price point is low, and you pay for it over time. You pay for it in fuel costs, which are high, and you pay for it in maintenance because fuel pumps break down a lot, and the maintenance costs are very high. So when we speak with farmers and they do the economic comparison, if they have a fuel pump, the solar pump almost always wins within even a 1-year time horizon, because often they are over-equipped with their fuel pump above their needs and burning a lot of fuel on it. And the economics of the solar water pump works so long as you have the financing.
Okay. I would love to continue that discussion, but I also want to give Elisa an opportunity. And I have a question. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Elisa, you mentioned, you touched on the issue of quality and the need for, perhaps a quality assurance framework. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether or not you think the sector is ready for such a framework. Clearly, the development and growing adoption of a quality assurance framework for PICO and solar home systems has clearly been an important driver for the growth and maturity that we're seeing in the off-grid kind of lighting electricity sector. Say a little bit more about kind of your thoughts on where things stand with regards to quality assurance.
Of course, thanks, Jim. From what we can see, there are certainly a lot of generic, low-quality products that are currently on the market, and so we think that well-designed quality assurance framework can certainly send the right signal to the market that product quality, durability, and truth in advertising are actually really important for protecting off-grid consumers. All the technical foundation that we just discussed and laid out by the data platform is actually paving the way towards quality assurance for off-grid appliances already, right? With all the data generated, it's certainly informing how an off-grid appliance QA structure or criteria could look like. And this is actually a question that we've been discussing and partnering with our colleagues on the Lighting Global side to really explore if there's a certain demand for the Off-Grid Appliances quality assurance framework. And so this is definitely forthcoming, and we definitely welcome feedback from industry stakeholder on this issue. It's going to be a continued discussion.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to hear more about that. All right, I'm cognizant of time. It's I think we have about 15 minutes left, and we certainly want to leave some time for the audience to ask questions. At this point, I'm going to hand things back to Katie because she controls or can see questions that are coming in. Katie, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim, for that wonderful discussion. As we shift to the live Q&A with the audience, I just would like to remind our attendees to please submit the questions through the question pane at any time, and we're also keeping up several links on the screen throughout for quick reference that point to information on upcoming webinars and previously held webinars and how to take advantage of the Ask an Expert program. We've had lots and lots of questions from the audience. We won't get to them all today, but we will definitely follow up with the attendees afterwards. Our first question for Elisa and Yasmin is, how is the commercial viability of efficient productive use appliances being currently measured through your study?
That is a very interesting question. I don't actually know how to answer that because I should say obviously the reports that we talked about today were just two small parts of a very large forward-moving system of different activities under the LEA program. There's a lot being done under research, one of which Michael presented, but there's going to be more and more, obviously, work on this. One good example that I can give that might kind of speak to this question about how do we measure affordability or sales is a partnership that we have cultivated with Gogla that will start next year, where Gogla will, for the first time, be measuring through their members not just sales of solar home systems and solar products, but also appliances. So that is something to look forward to. And as you know, Gogla puts out this research, I believe, on a yearly basis, as well as quarterly sales reports as well. So that is a first step into us being able to measure different milestones and different KPIs really around sort of progress towards making efficient appliances more available and more viable in the market. We also are working on refreshing the state of the Off-Grid Market report, which was put out, I believe, a few years ago, and Elisa would have more background on that than I do, but we are working with a number of partners, including IFC, on scoping the market and also sizing the market a little bit better, and obviously including more of the appliances that we are seeing as near to market at the moment. So that is a bit of a vague answer, but the general point is that there will be more and more data coming from us in the coming years.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Now I'm going to go to Michael for a question about your work in Tanzania. Was there any insights on efficiency of solar water pumps, and do you think the higher efficiency pumps result in lower costs, could drive greater adoption?
So it depends a bit on, I guess it depends is the refrain in this. If you're talking about portable pumps, surface pumps, things that people will take out to the field, then efficiency becomes important because a smaller panel is easier to carry. And that would be the driver there. From a pure cost standpoint, the cost of solar has gone down so much that in most of the systems we sell, we're providing 20% of the value of the system we're selling. So not the big driver of cost, and having a more efficient equipment that allows you to downsize 20% is not the major savings. The real savings is on the pump time and the upgrade. So while I think additional efficiency is certainly important, I think maybe for plugging into grids, there might be an implication if you have larger scale farming equipment plugging into grids. For off-grid solar water pumping equipment, especially the non-portable type, I don't see it as that as big.
Okay, Michael, and thank you. And we are having a little bit of audio difficulties with you. You seem to be cutting out a little bit. So maybe we can resolve that as we go to our next question to Yasmin and Elisa. Our next question is, how is the trade-off between price and quality changing for different kinds of efficient appliances over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And from the data set that we're seeing, we actually, a lot of the time it's really hard to find that correlation. Basically, because the appliance market is not fully mature yet, we're seeing the price just jump up and down regardless like what's the efficiency and quality of the product. And we're expecting that once the market gets a little bit more mature and get more organized, we might be able to start seeing a trend. Actually, like for TV, for example, this is a slightly more mature market. We're able to see that like more efficient TVs are correlated with like higher price tag now. But for fans and refrigerator, I think these two product markets still like really early in terms of development, and so not seeing that much of a correlation.
Okay, great. And a quick follow-up question is, do you have global figures for the future demand for domestic and small commercial off-grid refrigerators?
Katie, could you repeat the question?
Yes, I'm very sorry. Do you have global figures for the future demand for domestic or small commercial off-grid refrigerators?
Now, I would say that in the previous market research that we put out through Global Leap, there's some estimate of like how much the global market can grow in terms of TV, fans, and refrigerator. I can't quote the number on the top of my mind.
I almost want to say this may not be very accurate, but we do have this information on our website. But I almost want to say that the global market would grow to over $1 billion, I believe, if off-grid appropriate refrigerators were more available and at a price that customers could afford. I believe that's like at least a 2 times growth, if not more, possibly 3. And this is, again, something that we will be revisiting and rescoping in the State of the Market report that I mentioned, which will be coming hopefully next year.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Going back to Michael. Michael, regarding the solar pumps, are there different designs and brands and are there any particular brands that are more preferred? And also, is the distribution limited to Tanzania and East Africa?
So our distribution, Siemens Solar operates in Tanzania, but certainly solar water pumping, or I should say water pumping as a category, electric water pumps and those powered by solar are broad and adopted around the globe. It's just the degree of penetration and the level of the market it's reached is quite limited. There's certainly a number of different quality manufacturers out there. We've got some great partners, and we believe that there is a benefit in working with different manufacturers that have different areas of focus. Some are really focused on efficient surface pumps, and others are delving into the larger well pumps, borehole pumps that can produce larger volumes of water. It's quite diverse in terms of the manufacturers, and frankly, it's not, if you have the right electrical engineering on your team, designing a system that can work with any electric pump and that you sell as a solar water pumping package is possible. And so you're not limited to those who are exclusively selling a package of a solar panel with a pump. You can buy the panel separately and have your own packages. But just to list some of our partners, Enos is great. Subculture has been a great partner to us. Aqua Royale. There's a whole list of different manufacturers that we rely on and provide us good products and good warranties.
Great, thank you. And an attendee would like to know a little bit more. Can you mind explaining a bit more into detail about service-based model for the solar water pump supply?
Is that directed to me?
Yes, it is, Michael.
Yes, so service-based model is really tied up in the financing. So as I mentioned before, about 70% of our clients rely on financing, and even those who don't have a 2-year warranty with us and a commitment that we'll service their equipment for a fee thereafter. So the one part of the servicing is obviously just making sure the equipment keeps working. If there's any issues, you can provide some remote support or actually send your own person out to make a repair or replacement. And that gives a lot of confidence to people to make this investment and adopt this, what is a very new technology to them. But it goes beyond that, because when we've surveyed farmers and in the surveys from this report, we've seen that farmers are looking for, as I mentioned before, knowledge, agronomic support, some go far as to say links to market. They're really underserved in a number of fronts in the value chain and looking for that from the I guess companies they engage with, and they don't really engage with many. We're probably one of the few formal counterparties or servicers, supporters of many of these clients. So what that looks like is us engaging with quality seed suppliers, evaluating who are the quality seed suppliers and which seed suppliers provide training and service, and linking up with their networks and linking our farmers with them. Involves working with capacity builders. There's a number of different great horticultural associations and groups operating in Tanzania, and many farmers aren't aware of them. And so when you do come across a farmer and they're needing support, you can make that introduction, and that can really help them improve their practice. So I'd say the full servicer model is, we certainly have agronomists on staff, and we support our clients that way too. But I really want to encourage people to think about, being a team player in the value chain and focusing on partnerships more than trying to do it all yourself.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. And we're running out of time, and like I said, we had wonderful questions from the audience. So any questions that we don't get to, we'll follow up with the attendees afterwards. I think we have time for one more question with Elisa and Yasmin. As we discuss appliances, especially if we're looking at off-grid solar PV mini-grids, how do we plan for additional energy loads? And do we size the mini-grids for current load profile and add more later? Or do we oversize the system from the beginning?
That is a great question. It's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, isn't it? I think one thing we could say is, in a lot of cases, especially for public institutions such as health clinics in Sierra Leone, for example, which is something we're scoping for the Efficiency for Health work that I mentioned earlier, they basically found that the mini grids have such a high load already that it's not being used effectively with just a few lights and maybe one vaccine refrigerator that's available. So in some cases, there's a lot of room for your additional appliances to be used. It's just a question of finding the right ones and making sure they're as efficient as possible, so you can make the most out of the load that you have. The same is true for smaller mini grids that might be, for communities or a few households. I'm not a technical expert, so I don't know about adding extra loads to existing microgrids. Obviously, they all have their limits. But as we showed earlier at the beginning of my presentation, you can do a lot with very little when you have a lot of efficiency in play. So it's really a question of making sure you source and use the most appropriate and efficient appliances in such a configuration that you're not overloading the system.
And I will also add that having accurate performance data for appliances will be very important in terms of sizing mini-grid systems. Like through the data platform, like what we're trying to provide is this type of information so that mini-grid operator or solar home system can kind of like use this type of data and to estimate it, how much load they need to plan and design for. And so this is like definitely one of the resources that we would love to provide to mini-grid operators around the world. And there's some scenario and modeling that we can run here to kind of provide that additional support. But I would say that's one of the resources that people can reference.
Yeah, and it's definitely, again, to reiterate something Elisa said earlier, it's also very important to do field testing and make sure there's truth in advertising, because sometimes even laboratory testing can't account for all of the real life conditions that you might experience. And we've seen many case studies in which an appliance would use maybe 3 times the energy load that it was supposed to for various reasons. So it's very, very important to source appliances appropriately, and also for there to be enough testing of different kinds, both laboratory and field, to ensure that we have accurate data, like Elisa said.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And on behalf of the Clean Energy Solutions Center, I'd like to extend a thank you to all of our expert panelists and to our attendees for participating in today's webinar and for all the wonderful questions that you submitted. We very much appreciate your time and hope that there's some valuable insights that you can take back to your ministries, departments, and organizations. We also invite you to inform your colleagues and to those in your networks about the Solution Center resources and services, including our no-cost policy support through our Ask an Expert service. I invite you to check the Solution Center website if you'd like to view the slides and listen to the recording of today's presentation, as well as previously held webinars. In addition, you'll find information on upcoming webinars and other training events. We will also post recordings to the Clean Energy Solution Center YouTube channel. Please allow about 1 week for that posting to occur. Finally, I'd like to kindly ask you to take a moment to complete the short survey that will appear when we conclude the webinar. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you again at future Clean Energy Solution Center events. This concludes our webinar.